This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
One of the most enduring questions about end times Bible prophecy is the subject of our conversation tonight. This is a topic that has been debated by end times Bible scholars for 2,000 years. We probably won't resolve it in the next hour, but we'll give it our best shot. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me is a good friend, author of many books, most dealing with end times prophecy. We will put all of the titles in the show notes, so you can find those at VFTB.net or wherever you're finding this podcast. If you're watching tonight on YouTube, please subscribe and share. Otherwise, get our free mobile app, which brings it right into your hand and bypasses the gatekeepers of social media. Talk about that after in the second half of the program tonight. But now, without further ado, the man behind Faith Happens Publishing, his website, faith-happens.com. We welcome back to the program Doug Woodward. Doug, thanks for joining us tonight, and it's good to see you again. Looking forward to seeing you in Colorado Springs.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate very much the opportunity. I don't know how many times we've done View from the Bunker, but it's been a bunch. And it's at least as many times as I have books. That's what I would think. So,
yeah, and we're trying to keep up with each other. I think there's
a contest going here.
Yeah, but you're definitely in the lead. But
you're catching up quickly.
Well, but you and I both, I think, and I think most of us who are in this field, I don't think anybody, for the most part, who sincerely dives into the study of end times prophecy is doing it thinking that this is a way to just glorify themselves. We get into this because we're truly fascinated with this aspect of Christian theology, which is really at the heart of Christian doctrine. I mean, Paul makes it really clear in 1 Corinthians 15. Look, if Jesus isn't resurrected, then nobody's resurrected. And if nobody's resurrected, then we're all in trouble, and we of all people are most miserable. And Absolutely. Yet that's what is promised at the... Now, exactly how this is going to spin out, however, has divided Christians for the last...
That's a $64,000 question right there.
The last 2,000 years. Culminate? So you got a new work that is coming out, Will Babylon Be Rebuilt in the Last Days, excuse me. And lovely colors. The color scheme that was clearly what Nebuchadnezzar ordered from the contractors when he had the Ishtar Gate built, which is right on the cover right there. What was it that prompted this book, this study? And you pack a lot of information for viewers. I want to let you know this is a short read, a quick read, but packed with information. What is the topic, and what motivated you to do a deep dive into this particular aspect of end times prophecy?
Yeah. Well, I was actually having a discussion with Bob Ulrich and Mondo Gonzalez at Prophecy Watchers, and there was an increasing amount of concern that Bob expressed regarding individuals that had contacted him that are very confused about the fact that there are several very notable prophecy scholars that have been very firm in their prediction that Babylon, the ancient Babylon, the city of Babylon on the Euphrates River, is going to be rebuilt in the last days. And of course, when we look at what's been rebuilt so far, it's about maybe 10% the size of a Disney World or something like that. So it's not actually a burgeoning metropolis at the moment. And so if that's going to have to be rebuilt before the whole final 70th week of Daniel rolls out, then it's going to be a long, long time before that city gets rebuilt. So that concerns a lot of people.
No, I know that Saddam Hussein started the project back in the 1980s, and of course he never got very far before he was removed.
Yes,
but there are some.
His name on all the bricks that have been used so far in building back basically the city walls and a few of the little. I wouldn't call them. I call them little habitats, I guess, within the city, little apartments. And it's very small what's been done thus far. And no doubt the Iraq War slowed things down even more. So in fact, even the U.S. military, I think, was doing some things in the vicinity and had destroyed some aspects of what had been done thus far. So so they've taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So it's not going too fast.
Now, there are a number of teachers, including Chuck Missler, who we hold in high regard, who taught, and I remember hearing this back in the 90s as I was just starting to get involved in this. Sharon has been studying end times prophecy for many, many years. She was blessed to be raised up in a church where the pastor taught from the book of Revelation regularly. I did not. I grew up in denominations that avoided it like the plague because it's weird.
Well, it's very divisive, right?
Yeah.
And the pastors don't want to do anything that might cause parishioners and primarily financial givers to stop giving and to leave the church. So they have to be very careful. So there's two things that they generally don't want to deal with. One would be eschatology or prophecy. The second would probably be spiritual gifts.
Yeah.
Speaking in tongues, the charismata. And so those are two areas that most pastors, even evangelical pastors who take the Bible seriously, believe it's inspired Word of God, even they are very reluctant to talk about these things. But you're right. You point out Chuck Missler, late Chuck Missler. He, towards the end of his ministry, he did begin to talk about this, and he sort of pointed out, I think in concert with Waleed Shubat and Joel Richardson, he was sympathetic to the Islamic Antichrist theory, I call it. And although Joel is not necessarily a believer in the rebuilding of Babylon, he says, I wouldn't be surprised if that occurred, but it's not really part of the Islamic Antichrist theory. However, you've got two very strong dispensationalists in Mark Hitchcock and in Andy Woods, Dr. Andy Woods, that both have expressed strongly that they believe that that the ancient city of Babylon will be rebuilt and it will become the capital of the Antichrist. It'll become sort of the center of his rule, and I think that's not just religious, but politically, perhaps militarily, economically, and so it does cause one to scratch one's head, figuring out how all that could be relocated into a desert area that is a hop, skip, and jump away from major wars. So it doesn't look like the kind of place you'd normally like to invest in building a new city.
Well, and it's always been that way. That's one reason that Babylon, and I think we who have read the Bible assume that Babylon was a bigger deal in the ancient world than it really was. And there were periods where, yes, it was the dominant power, but it never lasted very long. Hammurabi the Great, Hammurabi the Great in the 18th century BC set up a kingdom, but it was very soon whittled down because it's not in an easily defensible area. Unlike the United States, North America, we've been blessed that we've got these big oceans between us and countries that would like to do us harm. That was not the case in Babylon, where it was surrounded by tribal leaders, other city-states that wanted what you had, and that's been the history of the ancient Near East, the lands of the Bible, going back to the time of Nimrod 5,000 years ago. So I agree with you. I don't see how this could be a really plausible. Even Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom didn't even last 100 years.
That's correct. Yeah, 100. It was limited to 100 years, and of course, the Jews were transported into Babylon for only 70 years before they were let go and basically could go back and begin to rebuild the temple and begin to rebuild the city. So it was a very short-term thing, and in fact the empire before it, Assyria, and the empire after it, really the Persian or the Medes and Persians, both of those lasted much longer than Babylon did, and yet Babylon, I think, sort of sown throughout the Bible, really going from the Tower of Babel and coming forward. Babylon has played just a huge role in the story of the Bible, and so there's no question that Babylon is a vital aspect of eschatology.
Right.
And in the book that I've just written, I'm really responding in detail to a book that Andy Woods had written recently on the issue of Babylon. And so I kind of use, I'm probably taking advantage of him to use it as sort of a skeleton to kind of, or outline to kind of go talk through all of these issues. And so that's really what I do. I kind of go through, I think I'm covering really all of the major issues that pertain to whether or not Babylon will be rebuilt. And so, you've read probably most of the book. My sense is I probably answered the issues and raised sufficient sort of counterpoints to make it very clear that it's not such a slam dunk that this is going to be what's happening.
So what is the premise then behind the belief that Babylon must literally be rebuilt on the site of ancient Babylon for prophecy to be fulfilled?
Right. Well, it kind of begins with the fact that there is a consistent belief among many evangelicals, prophecy scholars, that all of the evil religions of the world began at the Tower of Babel. Now, I kind of don't believe that, because I think that at the Tower of Babel, you were probably dealing with leaders that were communicating with demons, and that they were building a place, a ziggurat, in which they could communicate with God. That's really what the pyramids were. That's supposedly what the Pharaoh did. Mm-hmm. Go inside the pyramid, and then he could uniquely communicate with the gods. And so I think that was what was going on at Babel. I think that all of the mystery religions that have come about since then, and there's, of course, Egyptian and Greek and Roman, but while the kind of the beginning was at the Tower of Babel, it's not necessarily so, in the sense that I believe that there was over 2,000 years from the time of the flood back to the time of Adam. And it's a very safe bet, given what happened at the flood, that there were all kinds of weird religions going on in that antediluvian time. So it's kind of a sketchy argument to say that all religions began at Babel. But nevertheless, that's kind of the statement that's made. Part of this is an Alexander Hislop sort of hangover, if you will. Right? And he wrote a book called, which of course you know that, The Two Babylons. Mm-hmm. And in The Two Babylons, it's sort of a expose. It's sort of like, let's beat up the Catholics. And so he uses essentially the story of the mother and the infant, and shows how it's present throughout world religions. And it is. And but he shows that as its ultimate culmination, in his view, was with Mary and the baby Jesus, and that really is the Catholic sort of version of this mother-child religion. And so, nevertheless, Hislop, I think, kind of lurks behind a lot of dispensational teachers. And I think in this case, that's probably true. And, you and I probably have had the privilege to not be scared, to do some research outside the usual fence, that we're sort of bounded within. And so consequently, I know you have. I think I've discovered quite a few things that are really pertinent to understanding the Bible. I think both you and I have had some really excellent inspiration from Dr. Michael Heiser. Yep. That's caused us to think differently about the Bible, to take our Bible seriously and not be scared of our Bible, as he likes to say. And so we've looked at a lot of these things, but anyway, I think that's one of the core. It's one of the core issues. Probably the second issue that's more pertinent to his presentation is the belief that there is one Babylon. Chapter 17 and chapter 18 of Revelation deal extensively with Babylon. In 17, you're dealing fundamentally with Mystery Babylon. And then in 18, you're dealing with Babylon as a economic and political powerhouse. And then ultimately it sort of transposes itself into Revelation 19 and Babylon the Great. And so Andy is arguing that there's one Babylon. There's no difference between Mystery Babylon and Babylon the Great. And furthermore, based upon his citations of Jeremiah 50 and 51, he sort of brings forward a few of those citations and plants them into his discussion to suggest that maybe the daughter of Babylon is also part of this one Babylon scenario. And of course, I really take exception to that. So anyway, the idea that he has is that there's one Babylon, and you should not try to distinguish between Mystery Babylon, Babylon the Great, the daughter of Babylon, and so forth, which, as you know, we dispensationalists, we're always good at drawing lines between things and sort of pulling things apart and putting things over here, over there, over there. But distinguishing Mystery Babylon from Babylon the Great, that's probably part and parcel of kind of the whole dispensational eschatological point of view that we have.
Babylon in the ancient world was, and this was something that I should have known sooner than I did, just realized this just a few months ago, that Babylon in Hebrew, in the Hebrew mind, the same word refers to Babel and Babylon. Mm-hmm. And I would argue, based on the ages of history, that Babylon was not the location of Babel, the God Gate, or Bab Elu, the Gate of Gods.
Right.
That was probably.
Do you believe, as I do, that Babel was probably in southeastern Turkey or in northern Syria? What's your point of view on that?
I believe it was at the ancient city of Eridu, which is further south, closer to the Persian Gulf.
Okay,
and that's based on
that's where you see it.
Yeah, just based on the discovery of the ancient ziggurat there, the oldest and would have been largest if it had ever been completed, but apparently it was. Yeah. Anyway, but I can see an argument for that location as well, Turkey or northern Syria, because in the research I did for my book, The Second Coming of Saturn, that entity who goes back to the ancient Hurrian god Kumarbi, El of the Canaanites, Enlil of the Mesopotamians, you can trace his origin story to that region, northern Syria, southern Turkey, which not coincidentally is where Abraham was called from. So yeah, you got some. But I think the larger point again being that what we're talking about when you mention Babylon or Babel. Again, in Greek it's different, but in Hebrew it's the same exact word, and they refer to two different things: the city of Babylon or the God Gate or Gate of Gods, which wasn't necessarily located at Babylon.
That's true, and I don't think, although it is true to say that conquerors, as they kind of came across that part of the land, that part of the region, they would tend to destroy whatever tower existed in Babylon at the time. So it had to continue to be rebuilt. Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt it when he took over his kingdom, and so he built the tower back, which I believe he thought was the Tower of Babel. Whether it was or not just depends, because 2,500 years had passed from the Tower of Babel to when Nebuchadnezzar refurbished it.
Correct. Right.
All right. So hard to know.
So we're looking at then at the premise of Dr. Wood's book being that the geography cannot be separated from the theology. When you're talking Babylon, you've got to be talking about a geographic location, and it has to be that geographic location. It's not, in other words, it's not a symbol representing the last days occult religion of the Antichrist. Yeah,
I think the way that he would phrase it is, it's not a religious system. All right, so those that would see Mystery Babylon as potentially a religious system, that they would be off base. So he would just say, although it's called Mystery Babylon, this is where I can begin to provide some critique, but because it's called Mystery Babylon, he still feels that it's located geographically where ancient Babylon was. And I think that he believes Babel and Babylon, they were at the same place. And so I don't know if you could say he's a conventionalist, but I do think that, as I said before, the specter of Hislop kind of hangs back behind a lot of this book, in my opinion. So, but yeah, it's so it can't be a religious system. And of course, I talk about, and others do as well, that mystery, comma or mystery hyphen Babylon, it is a mystery. So it takes, the scripture says, it takes wisdom to understand what this is. John was baffled by it, just like it took wisdom to understand the mark of the beast. this was not an obvious thing. If it was obvious, John wouldn't have been baffled. And so that's my view. Then, the other thing that is confusing to say that it's geographical is in that chapter, chapter 17, there are 4 major different geographical metaphors used. There is waters, city on the waters. There is a city in the desert. It is in the wilderness, and it is also associated with mountains. And yet we learn that the mountains symbolize empires or kings, and so they don't necessarily indicate the 7 hills of Rome.
Right.
Although that is, kind of the traditional view, Hal Lindsey put forth that, and I think, probably the standard dispensational point of view is that Rome is symbolic, or Babylon is symbolic of Rome, and that Rome was the evil empire at the time of Christ, and that Rome would be rebuilt. Rome would come back, and so it would be revived, the revived Roman Empire. And so certainly we know a number of our colleagues that teach in eschatology that still profess that Rome, will be revived, that the Antichrist will be a European ruler. And of course, so that's one of the key issues. Is that really, how it should be? Joel Richardson has a very different view. The Islamic Antichrist, he tends to think in terms of Babylon being a symbol for Mecca or a symbol for Saudi Arabia. And so in both of these cases, Dr. Woods, really doesn't take the time to critique those points of view, a little bit more on Rome, but much less on the Islamic Antichrist. And I believe that kind of weakens his argument, because his argument is based upon, and he really cites a lot of the old-time scholars, dispensational scholars, Clarence Larkin, John Darby. So you look at Schofield. So it reads like a who's who, but all these scholars, for the most part, they lived and died over 100 years ago. And so it's sort of like the standard view. It's been frozen, and that's really where Andy still kind of is, in my perspective, my understanding of his point of view. So let me stop there and see if you want to make some comments.
Yeah, the geopolitical situation on the earth has changed a lot since the beginning of the 20th century, when Bullinger, for example, and Schofield were writing, Clarence Larkin and those. The United States was not the world power then that it is now. I mean, for those of us in the
beginning to be, because they were writing 1901 to 1910, 1915 in that time frame. Yeah.
The United States really didn't reach to become the global power that it is today until after World War II, really.
I'd say that, after World War I, it was clear that America was looked at as the decisive factor in winning World War I, coming into the battle. And obviously Wall Street began to be much stronger and more important. When there was a Great Depression in 1929, the whole world felt the impact of that. But you're absolutely right. The American century didn't really begin until about 1945.
Right. And so for those of us who were raised in the post-war era, I'm the tail end of the baby boom, so I've never known a time when America wasn't the dominant power in the world. But prior to World War II, that was not the case. So, and that has an influence on eschatology, because the fellows back then could look at a world and perhaps conceive of a day when Babylon could be rebuilt. But quite frankly, I just don't see that in the current conditions, unless something really drastic happens of just a catastrophic nature to not just the United States, but the UK, Russia, Europe. I mean, China. There's just nothing. And this is not specifically directed at Andy Wood's book, but just looking at it from a geopolitical standpoint, even a theopolitical standpoint, if you will, I just don't see anything that attracts the gravity of global power, religious and political power, to that spot in Iraq.
Yeah, well, Joel Rosenberg, who's another very famous voice in eschatology, that is dual citizen, Israeli as well as American, written many books. All of those are New York Times bestsellers. And of course, this is still his point of view. But he's been saying that the city is going to be rebuilt. He said it recently. I did some research, and he was saying the same thing in 2001. So he's been saying Babylon's going to be rebuilt, and it is a fulfillment of prophecy. Well, it's pretty problematic, just like saying that the European Union is going to be the power center of the Antichrist. Perhaps, but the European Union has had so many false starts, and with England not being a part of it, that's a major chink in its armor and so forth. So, so there's a lot of reasons why you have to wonder. One of the big things that I bring out is that if you're saying that Babylon is going to become sort of the centerpiece or the capital of the Antichrist, what you're saying is that the military, the political power, not just a religious center, not just sort of a temple to the occult, but it's going to have enormous building and so forth done. And yet what we know is, and this of course really drives towards the point that I bring out, is that there's really strong arguments that there are multiple Babylons. And I can go into that more in a moment. But what Dr. Wood says, and Mark Hitchcock, who of course is very much revered, and even Arnold Fruchtenbaum, that's what I'm saying. There's really some strong people that argue this. But we know that the city has not been rebuilt. If it's going to be rebuilt by the Antichrist, it has to be rebuilt relatively quickly. And then if it's going to be the center of the economic power, the political power, the military power, and so forth, it is a strange proposition, because somewhere, probably just after the midpoint of the tribulation, the Antichrist destroys Babylon. He destroys Mystery Babylon.
Right.
And so it's almost as if he built it, and built it, and maybe 5 years later he destroys it. And so you probably have a destroyed, burned out Babylon, and yet when Dr. Woods talks about, and even again Mark Hitchcock, when they talk about the sort of coming together of the armies of the world, they indicate that these armies are going to be gathered together at Babylon. Well, that's absolutely not true. They come together somewhere in the north of Israel, and they probably attack not at Harmageddon, but quoting Dr. Heiser, they're probably attacking near Jerusalem.
Yes, absolutely.
In the Valley of Decision and so forth. Yes. And so it's, again, a very awkward statement to say that Babylon that has been destroyed is going to be the gathering place for the armies that the Antichrist is going to challenge. So it just becomes very difficult to see. It's sort of like these are logically inconsistent to point these things out. So when you're interpreting Scripture, you kind of have to. You can't pick and choose which scriptures you look at. There's the ones that don't fit. You can't ignore them. You have to say, well, what about those ones that don't fit?
Well, you're essentially setting up the premise for one of my presentations at Colorado Springs.
I'm a good straight man. I really am.
But
happy to oblige.
No, because I agree. There you have to account for that, and that's one of the things that's always struck me as odd about the Islamic Antichrist theory, that I don't see any way that in any reality where an Islamic leader is welcomed into the promised land as he appears to be at the end of Daniel chapter 11. You read the last 10 or so verses of Daniel 11, which reads like the wars of Antichrist, and that Antichrist figure there appears to be waging war on behalf of Israel. Yes. And he pitches his tent between the sea and the glorious city. So
city.
Right. So it struck me, and I've got to give credit where it's due. Chris White put forward this theory in his commentary on Daniel some years back, that Islam would be the cannon fodder that would be sacrificed to lure Jews, deceive Jews into welcoming this champion as their Messiah.
Right.
But so in that sense, you might see
Absolutely agree.
you might see a city, Mystery Babylon, or a Babylon the Great, that is destroyed as part of that deception. But that's where I think that Joel Richardson might have something. I tend to agree with him in identifying Mystery Babylon or Babylon the Great as Mecca. But there are other scenarios that you could spin out that accomplish the same thing. It's just I'm not sure I see how Babylon would fit into that.
It's kind of like any religion that is Antichrist is of the spirit of the Antichrist, and so it's really easy for us Christians to say Islam is of the spirit of Antichrist, right? So that's very easy. Now, Joel Richardson, of course, you could get me started on the Islamic Antichrist theory, and I've debated Joel before. We have to decide who really won that debate. I know Joel feels like he did, but nevertheless, Joel sees one war. He sees Gog and Magog, the final battle of Jerusalem. All of that is at the very end of this period of time. There's only one personage. There's Gog, and he's also Antichrist, right? And there's only one war at the end of Daniel's 70th week. Now, he is a futurist, and he's not a pre-rapture guy. He's our pre-tribulation rapture guy. He would believe in the rapture, I'm sure, but at the very end, he'd be a post-trib kind of guy. But, it's the whole issue of the Islamic Antichrist. There's quite a few things that, because the book of Revelation several times uses the phrase that Antichrist, for instance, would become, basically the ruler of all peoples, tongues, nations. It's as if John, in expressing this, is making it as clear as possible that this is the entire world. This isn't just the Middle East. And so you say, well, no, it is. It's just the Middle East. The Bible's a book of the Middle East. It's a Mediterranean book. Okay, so is that saying that the mark of the beast just goes into effect in Turkey and Israel and Iran and Saudi Arabia? Is it just a regional mark of the beast? What of all the other nations? What would if Russia still exists? What would Russia say? What would the U.S. say? What would the European Union say? And so the fact that he scopes it down to just this one region, that's where, it begins to break down. Now, back at the end of the 1990s, when the Russian bear had sort of dissipated and we were looking for a new enemy, well, and we were in prophecy as well, all of a sudden Islam looked like the obvious enemy. And so Joel, I think, hit the wave, the surf, just at the right crest, and built a strong presentation. He's a good writer. He's a great person, great minister, great evangelist, and he has some very good ideas. But fundamentally, it goes against virtually every major construct of Bible prophecy that futurists believe in. So his view is a peculiar view. Now, notwithstanding, it still is a view that probably 50% of our brethren who study prophecy, they would say they believe in the Islamic Antichrist theory, despite the fact that there's these problems, because he's done such a great job presenting it, writing great books. He had the backing of WorldNet Daily. And so, he got those books distributed, convinced many, many, many people that this is the way it's going to be. Now, we would not necessarily agree, but you have to appreciate the quality of his work.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact is, he is a brother in Christ. I mean, I really appreciated his book, When a Jew Rules the World. So, yeah. Yeah,
no, he's a good brother. So, but it's still problematic. As I pointed out to him, I said, look, you could point out that there's maybe 15 to 20 major sort of attributes of the end times, and virtually none of them are discussed in the Islamic Antichrist theory. Where does the mark of the beast figure in? When does the beast appear? How does that play with Gog Magog? There are so many features of of biblical eschatology that just don't seem to fit in the scenario. So yeah. So anyway, there's that. So it is an issue.
Well, and the identity of Babylon is, again, coming back to the first point that I made in this this discussion, is still raising questions. I mean, here we are 2,000 years on from John the Revelator writing the book and receiving his revelation, and we still don't quite understand it. You and your co-authors in the book, The Final Babylon, made the case that we are to look on this side of the ocean for Babylon. So what is it about where we live, the nation from which we are recording this programming, what we call home? Why will we find the final Babylon here in the United States?
Right. Well, in the position that I've taken, my position's advanced a bit from where we were back in 2013 with the final Babylon. I've come to see, rather than America being sort of Babylon the Great, moving throughout most of the tribulation period, still being there before it's destroyed by the Antichrist, I now believe that America is destroyed before Daniel's 70th week. I believe it's part of the Gog-Magog war, and I believe America is the daughter of Babylon, described in Jeremiah 50 and 51. The attributes of the daughter of Babylon do not fit Mystery Babylon, and they really don't fit Babylon the Great. And so in this book, I highlight those things, and I actually talk about, I don't know if I can find it or not now, but I talk about Andy's sort of listing the major aspects. You know, he says that when I first heard the notion that America could be Babylon, I laughed. You know, I didn't think there was any way that could be true. Now, of course, you've heard my presentation many times, and I can cite, a dozen different scholars that have believed that America is the last Babylon, going back to Frank Logsdon back in the 60s at the Moody Church in Chicago and so forth. But what happens here is Woods goes through, about 6-7 different points about why America could be considered Babylon. And after he's gone through those points, I'm kind of trying to find a few of them to talk about it. But after he's gone through those points, kind of what I say is, well, all right, so you've gone through all these points, and it sure looks like America is uniquely qualified and is the unique candidate to fulfill those prophecies. All right, and so he sort of like points all these things out, and then at the end of that, he says, but it's not America. And I said, oh, wait a second here. It's kind of like, and the analogy I use is if, wait a second, I'm getting closer to it. We're about page 15, 16. He talks a lot about here we go. He talks a lot about the Roman idea. All right, so here we go. His comments, New York is the location of the only world governing body, the United Nations, right? Which, quoting from Jeremiah 51, and the nations shall not flow together anymore unto him, and the nations will no longer stream to him, right? New York is a great city of commerce. These are Andy's comments. New York is a great city of commerce, home of Wall Street, the famous New York Exchange, and I talk about, the size of the financial center of New York. It's right. There's only two centers of commerce like this: the city of New York and the city of London, which is the financial district of London. New York is a deep water port and perhaps the greatest seaport in the world. Kind of important. Babylon's on the waters. New York hosts the Statue of Liberty, which arguably resembles the harlot sitting on many waters. She holds a golden cup in her hand. That relates to a couple of things. Jeremiah 51:7, Revelation 17:4. Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand, making all the earth drunken. The nations drank of her wine, therefore the nations went mad. So my question is, there are only two nations that could qualify as a golden cup in the Lord's hands. What are those two nations? I'll put you on the spot. What are the two nations that can qualify as a golden cup in the Lord's hands? There's only two, Israel
and the United States. Yeah.
There are no others. There are no others. And so if you're Chris White, you might say, well, it's Israel, because that's kind of his view, unless he's changed it. But moving on now, so we talk about the Statue of Liberty. New York is arguably the culture center of the world. And I put down here, well, Paris is kind of a close second. Paris is a great city.
Mm-hmm.
New York is the largest consumer of illicit drugs. And the USA is also the capital of the globe's pornography and so forth. It's the consumer haven of the world, right? New York is known for welcoming immigrants from all over the world. It's actually grown to be the nation's largest sanctuary city. New York has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's all of these, there's 4 times in these chapters, it's stated to the Jews, to the people of God, leave Babylon, flee from the Babylonians, right? Now, the question is, can you flee from a place where you don't live?
Yes, true. I can't imagine that there are any Jews living in Babylon today. Yes.
So you have maybe 5, I think I quoted in here, 5 or 6 million Jews living in New York City. And how many Jews do you have living in Babylon today? 0. None. So it's hard to flee from Babylon. All right. Now, what do I have down here? I have New York, and I actually break out that in detail here from one of the statistical magazines that points out the statistics. So I guess what I say, is if it looks like a duck, waddles like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And so there you have these attributes. R.A. Coombs will identify a total of 67 or 68 that New York and the United States. New York is sort of the symbol or the icon of the United States, and so it's my view that the United States is the daughter of Babylon. And as I point out as the book goes on, the reason I say there's not 2 but there are 3 Babylons is because each of these Babylons, the daughter of Babylon, Mystery Babylon, and then ultimately the Colossus, Babylon the Great, which is sort of all the world's human systems and so forth. There are 3 different Babylons, and we know they're different because they're destroyed in different ways. The daughter of Babylon is destroyed by nations from the north, by alliances from the north that destroy with missiles, with arrows, Babylon, daughter of Babylon. We know Mystery Babylon is destroyed by whom? Eric, it's a quiz. Who destroys Mystery Babylon?
The kings, the Antichrist, and then 10 kings who serve him turn on her and destroy her, right? Yeah.
So it's not the alliance of northern nations; it's the Antichrist. Now, who destroys Babylon the Great? Who is it that destroys finally, ultimately, Babylon? And how is it done? The destroyer of Babylon the Great is Jesus Christ. And he destroys it with the breath of his mouth, with the double-edged sword that comes from his mouth. It's not the Antichrist destroying Babylon the Great, it's Christ. And so what you have here is you have 3 different Babylons destroyed at 3 different times during the, I believe, the final maybe 10 years, certainly the 7 years of Daniel. But you have 3 different Babylons destroyed at 3 different times by 3 different means or 3 different destroyers. So if you look at that, and I have this nice little chart there, you might see where's that chart? It's towards the end here. It's probably on about page 30 something. But I everybody it's a dispensationalist. If they're worth, anything, it's on page 23. So when is Babylon destroyed? And so I have this nice chart that shows that you've got New York over there on the left. You have Rome, sort of in the middle, which I equate with Mystery Babylon. I don't believe it's uniquely Mystery Babylon. Any heretical religion, especially if they're Christian, that aren't following the gospel or Jesus Christ, they're Mystery Babylon. And then finally, Babylon the Great, which I show here is the city of London, proposing that New York's destroyed, but the city of London continues on after the War of Gog and Magog. Because I believe the U.S. is destroyed. It's taken out just as the War of Gog and Magog begins, or just before it begins. The Americans are taken out. unfortunately for us.
Well, and that would make sense from a strategic standpoint because we are the primary defender of Israel outside of that region and take out America, and then we will not interfere when the rest of the world
will not be able to intervene or interfere.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that probably used to be more than it is right now at this very moment.
Yeah, true.
Depends who the president is at any given time, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, sort of my knockdown, drag out argument. Ultimately, is that's why, I believe that you cannot say that Mystery Babylon, Babylon the Great, the daughter of Babylon, that they're all one Babylon. It's illogical based upon all that.
No, and you're convincing me here. And again, I've scanned through your book as I've been trying to keep up with some changes going on.
I'm getting excited about actually reading it now.
Yeah, you are actually. Because this helps fit puzzle pieces together, and like you say, you've progressed in your understanding of things since the final Babylon in 2013. I'm finding myself disagreeing with things that I publicly said at the last Prophecy Watchers conference in Colorado.
You hate that? It's like you have to contradict yourself.
Yeah.
I no longer believe
okay,
what
look.
I once said.
Back what I said in 2017. Forget all of that. I didn't know what I was talking about.
I didn't mean that. So, I know it's all too true. So that's what the book is really. It's the critique of that. Then I do add a couple of other pieces in this book that are in American Requiem, which is another new book. By the way, both of these books I've gone color. So
wow!
The books are color on the inside as well as the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And so I discovered Amazon, the Kindle service. Now can, for only a couple of dollars more, can give you a color book, which I think people are going to enjoy because I try to pack it with pictures and charts and things like that on my books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I think that will help.
Well, again, this is a fairly quick read. It's not a lengthy tome.
1 hour read probably.
But it's a deep study on this particular aspect of prophecy, and again, it's an aspect. It's a detail that. Well, the fact that we're discussing this here in 2022 shows that we go, 19, 20 centuries after the book of Revelation. And John, of course, was aware of all of the Old Testament prophecies coming from Jeremiah and Isaiah. We still don't see it clearly. But our God, who spoke the universe into existence, is the greatest general in all of history. He's not called Yahweh of armies. That's what Lord of hosts actually means.
That's what it means.
Not for nothing. So he's not revealing his specific battle plans to us. All we need to know for sure is that our futures are guaranteed. So where do people get a copy of the new book? You say American Requiem is also a brand new book?
Yeah, I did a second edition of American Requiem, and I did some tweaks and updates. Also turned all of its photographs and charts into color as well. And so it's both of these books now have been published just about 3-4 weeks ago. And so they're both available right now in paperback at Amazon or at my website. So you can find either of these books, American Requiem or Will Babylon Be Rebuilt in the Last Days, at Amazon as well. So
all right.
Anyway, I think folks will find it a pretty compelling read, and hopefully they will find it helpful and useful. Yes.
Well, we've been talking up your Rebooting the Bible series, which Sharon and I have taken to heart, and we now consult the Septuagint every time we do our weekly Bible study because we find so many interesting not discrepancies. Yeah, but just that window of understanding. On what the Jewish religious scholars in the Second Temple period were thinking about their Old Testament or their Bible, our Old Testament, but their scriptures is really enlightening. The books Will Babylon Be Rebuilt in the Last Days? Also, American Requiem, a new edition from Doug Woodward. I'll put links in the show notes wherever you're checking out the podcast, whether it is at YouTube or at VFTB.net or the new mobile app. You'll find the notes down below the video there. And do check it out. Doug, we really appreciate your friendship and your scholarship. And look forward to, hopefully we can spend some time just sitting around and talking and sharing ideas when we're together in Colorado Springs or maybe at some other point down the road.
I absolutely hope so. Oh, be sure to flash my website, maybe at the bottom of one of the, as we're concluding this presentation. That'd be appreciated, because you can also buy the book straight from me if you'd like, and I'll even sign them for you. So,
all right, there you go.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Colorado Springs, and I'm going to do a presentation for Skywatch on rebooting the Bible and really dig into it. And so I think that folks that are streaming the Skywatch conference, which is about a week before the Prophecy Watchers conference.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to get a chance to look carefully at rebooting the Bible. And I think I'll convince you that the biblical timeline, in fact, is different than what Bishop Usher told us.
Very cool.
So, so hopefully it'll shake you up just a little bit.
All right. Doug's website is faith-happens.com. And yes, we've mastered the art of the lower third over the last 7 years at Skywatch. So yeah, people will have seen that. Yeah.
Yes. Indeed.
Author of Will Babylon Be Rebuilt in the Last Days? Doug, thanks for joining us tonight.
Always a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you so much, Derek.
Check the notes below wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast for the website, for Doug, the link to Doug's website, that is. That's faith-happens.com, and check out his most recent book and his previous works, all thoroughly researched and highly recommended. Coming up, how you can get free access to all of Skywatch Films' documentaries, and if you've been waiting to get a copy of my new book, The Second Coming of Saturn, for one of Tom Horn's crazy deals at the Skywatch TV store, the deal is in. And I'll tell you how to get that in just a minute. Also, we will discuss the leak from the Supreme Court earlier this week and why is the Biden administration openly admitting that we helped sink Russia's Black Sea flagship and kill a dozen of their generals. That and more as A View from the Bunker continues. This program is an outreach of Gilbert House Ministries, one of the ways we share the hope that we have in our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Each week, we produce Unraveling Revelation, a study of Bible prophecy from Genesis to Revelation. Sci Friday, a look at science news through a biblical lens. Our weekly study of the Bible, the Gilbert House Fellowship, as we go through the Bible verse by verse in chronological order. And my podcast, A View from the Bunker. And we rely on your support. There are two ways you can join us in this mission. First and foremost, your prayers. We truly and deeply appreciate your prayerful support. And if you are led to help us financially, you can do that two ways. First, you can donate through a link at our website, gilberthouse.org. Second, you can visit our online shop, a sort of virtual book table where you'll find our books and DVDs. Just click the link at gilberthouse.org or scan the QR code on your screen. And during the month of May, save 20% on all DVDs with the promo code MAY20. That's May20. Again, thank you for your prayers, and thank you for your support. Talking the walk every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at VFTB.net, gilberthouse.org. Check out our new app. It not only gets you all of our content right in your mobile device, smartphone, or tablet, whether it's iOS, Android, or Amazon Kindle Fire. You can also put us up on Roku now. All of the content that comes out of our house, I mean, literally comes out of our house. This is my office/man cave behind me here. We got a link to it in the top menu bar at VFTB.net. You'll also find it at gilberthouse.org. Gets you that, our weekly Bible study, and Unraveling Revelation and Sci Friday too. So again, free. No cost to you. On social media, Twitter at View from Bunker or at Derek Gilbert. On Facebook, View from the Bunker. Gab Me, We Get Her Parlor, and now Truth Social on all of those at Derek P. Gilbert. And you'll find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Gilbert House. What is going on with the Biden administration? Why are they admitting now? This took place toward the end of last week that U.S. intelligence is being fed to Ukrainian military forces in real time. We are providing real-time battlefield intelligence to the Ukrainian military. And according to U.S. officials, this is being reported by the Daily Mail and other corporate media sites, the U.S. provided intelligence that not only helped sink Russia's Black Sea flagship, the Moskva, that the United States intelligence, in fact, we provided the intel to Ukraine that confirmed that, yes, that ship out there within range of your cruise missiles is, in fact, the Moskva. U.S. intelligence has helped Ukrainian forces kill several Russian generals, and Ukrainian officials are claiming that they've killed 12 so far, which is stunning. Now, this story was broken by the New York Times, which is usually where the FBI goes to leak. Usually Intel, CIA normally goes to Washington Post, but whatever. Corporate media reporting this. And I just have to wonder, how far is Joe Biden and his administration going to push the issue until Vladimir Putin decides, okay, that's it, you've crossed the red line? Now, I think it's becoming apparent that Russia's military is not as skilled as a lot of Western advisors thought, although there is still the possibility that Putin has not put his frontline troops into the fight in Ukraine, holding back his more experienced units for an eventual shooting war with NATO. And I, for one, pray that that doesn't come to pass, because from what I have heard from fellows who should know, our NATO allies in Western Europe really aren't prepared for a ground fight with Russia. In fact, think tanks inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. have run these war games repeatedly and found that every single time they run these tabletop exercises, every time they war game it, the team representing the Russian side always wins. So that could lead to just a really bad cascade of things that could end up in an actual nuclear exchange. Russia has already said flat out that they will consider using tactical nukes on the battlefield. Military experts that I've spoken to behind the scenes say, yeah, that's part of their officially stated military doctrine. So our guys shouldn't be concerned, or should be concerned rather, but Pentagon officials who've been interviewed by corporate media outlets say they are not concerned. At what point did they get concerned that maybe the politicians in D.C., who don't strike me as being overly connected to reality, I mean, somehow they think that plausible deniability is enough to keep Russia from swinging back? No, we didn't kill your generals. Oh, yeah, well, okay, we provided the intelligence that pinpointed where they were when the Ukrainians killed them, but we didn't do it. I just don't think that's going to carry a lot of weight with Vladimir Putin. Not that I'm suggesting that Vladimir Putin should be allowed to run roughshod over Ukraine. I know this is an issue that gets a lot of people really worked up on both sides. There are some who say, well, Putin is an Orthodox Christian, and therefore we support him because of that. And yes, there is some truth to the fact that Ukrainian forces, including that Azov battalion, the neo-Nazi organization, was shelling citizens in eastern Ukraine before Russia invaded on February 24th. And the corporate media here in the U.S. was openly calling the Azov battalion neo-Nazis before the invasion. Now that's kind of an inconvenient fact that's sort of downplayed because it doesn't fit the narrative. The bottom line is that, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, the bottom line is that innocent people are caught in the middle. And I think as Christians, we can agree that that's a situation that needs to stop. We should address that. We can get the rest taken care of, presumably, or we should anyway, at a negotiating table. But Putin has been making his position clear for years, and until 2004, nobody considered it plausible that NATO would expand right up to Russia's borders. And now not only do we have NATO members on Russia's borders, Finland and Sweden want to join, which would extend the shared border between NATO and Russia by about 800 miles. So the neo-libs look like they're going to get their war with Russia that they're pushing for. Meanwhile, while this is going on, America has been distracted by the fact that late last Monday, somebody inside the Supreme Court leaked to Politico a draft opinion of a vote by the Supreme Court justices on that Mississippi case that could overturn Roe v. Wade. That's the 1973 ruling that made abortion legal in all 50 United States. Now, even pro-abortion legal experts I've spoken to over the years, I used to host a secular radio talk show. It was 15 years ago, but, I did that for a while. And they will admit that the ruling Roe v. Wade back in 1973 was bad law. And again, pro-abortion legal scholars will say it was a bad ruling. The justices back in 1973 found, apparently in invisible ink, a right that does not exist in the Constitution. And now it's supposed to be settled law until, of course, another law comes along that liberals don't like. Like, for example, they got, the law in Texas against same-sex marriage overturned. That was settled law too, but okay. Being a liberal means never having to deal with cognitive dissonance, holding two opposing ideas at the same time inside your head. It appears, based on the draft opinion, which was written by one of the conservative justices, Samuel Alito, that he and 4 other conservative justices, not sure yet how Chief Justice John Roberts is going to vote. It appears that, like he's done before, he was trying to find some middle ground. Okay, let's not overturn the Mississippi law. Let's uphold the Mississippi. Well, wait, no. Let's overturn the Mississippi law, but not overturn Roe v. Anyway, he's outside the Supreme Court doing this to check the wind. But the other 5 conservative justices appear ready to strike down, to uphold the Mississippi law and strike down Roe v. Wade as bad law. Alito's opinion makes it very, very clear that Roe v. Wade was a bad ruling when it was made and should now be struck down. The idea that once the Supreme Court rules, it should never be ruled on again just doesn't hold water, because there were some bad rulings by the Supreme Court back in the 19th century, like the Dred Scott case, that needed to be overturned. So the fact that this draft opinion was leaked, though, is a big, big deal. One observer of the court says this is as big a deal as the New York Times publishing the Pentagon Papers back in 1971, which was the secret history of the Vietnam War, revealed that the Vietnam War was not going the way we were being told it was by the corporate media back in the 60s and 70s, that the Pentagon had been lying about what was going on. That's how important this is, that somebody decided to leak what should have been a secret draft only available to the justices and a small handful of clerks working for those justices. Somebody inside the court, or one of the clerks working for the court, leaked it to Politico, and this is a big, big deal. And of course, it's triggered protests all week. Contrary to what pro-abortion activists will say, this does not immediately mean back alley abortions for everyone. What it means is that the states get to decide for themselves. The citizens of the states get to decide whether or not this practice should be illegal. It would mean that in about 13 states across the country, abortion would become immediately or almost immediately illegal. It would be followed very quickly by a number of other states. On the other hand, 17 states plus the District of Columbia have passed laws protecting abortionists, keeping it legal in those states. So we will probably see an increase in migration, both from liberal states to conservative and vice versa, in the months and years ahead as this shakes out. But again, this was the intent of the framers of the Constitution, that the citizens of individual states would more or less determine their own destiny, rule themselves, rather than have one central government in Washington, D.C. dictating how everybody in the entire nation is going to live. And the Supreme Court has abused its power because, in large part, Congress has refused to rein in the power of the Supreme Court. Our congressmen and women don't want to be responsible for unpopular decisions, and so they just punt and let the Supreme Court rule on it. Sadly, this has resulted in a number of really bad rulings over the last, throughout the history of the court, but Roe v. Wade is right at the top of that list. So the official ruling will be made probably before the court goes on recess late June, early July, although now with protesters perhaps getting a little kinetic in their protests, could threaten the justices themselves. D.C. police put up a fence around the Supreme Court earlier this week and have increased police protection around the homes of the justices because Molech and Inanna do not want their sacrifices ended anytime soon. Babylon Bee hit a home run with this one. They put out a story on Friday portraying that very famous statue of Molech as the bull, the bull statue with his arms outstretched to receive the child to be burned in the fire, as a Democratic spokesperson, and saying that Molech is concerned about supply chain issues regarding child sacrifice now that Roe v. Wade is apparently set to be overturned. Pray for our country because this coming election, the midterm election, is going to be heated. Well, no better time than to take advantage of some teaching from some wiser men, and I mean wiser than me, probably not you, but wiser than me anyway. Tom Horn, Jonathan Kahn, Joel Richardson, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Ken Johnson, many others, all taking part in Skywatch TV's Defender Conference, The Unveiling. We just recorded Sharon's presentation this afternoon. It's a new take on Psalm 23. She's already taught on this a couple of times and caused people's jaws to drop with her connection of Psalm 23 and the dolmens of the Jordan River Valley. But this talk takes it even farther. If Jesus is our good shepherd, then who or what is the bad shepherd? That's her talk. Jonathan Kahn talks about some of the issues that he raises in the forthcoming film based on his Harbingers books. My presentation deals with the connection between Mount Hermon and the Mount of Olives and the entity connected to those. It's titled Unveiling Lucifer, but when you get right down to it, it's about the Mount of Assembly and its role in the final battle, Armageddon. You can get a complete list of the presenters at defenderconference.com, but the free access to Skywatch Films documentaries is a really sweet bonus. 5 documentary films, 2 Telly Award winning, the most recent, Josh Peck's best so far, I think, The Great Delusion about the UFO phenomenon, which features Tom Horn, Nick Pope, formerly of Britain's Ministry of Defense, the late Noah Hutchings, the late Russ Dizdar, the late Chris Putnam. Several brothers have gone home to be with the Lord. Timothy Alberino, L.A. Marzulli, I'm honored to take part in it. Late Chuck Missler, also part of that. That's just one of the 5 that you'll get access to when you sign up for Skywatch TV's Defender Conference, The Unveiling. Don't miss this. You get complete access to all of these presentations and the documentaries for 90 days, beginning next Friday. Well, this coming Friday, actually, Friday the 13th at 12:01 a.m. Central Time here in the U.S. That's UTC -5. And for 90 days, you watch on your schedule. You decide what you want to watch and in what order. And again, it's at defenderconference.com. Then in just a couple of weeks, we will be, as I mentioned with Doug, in Colorado Springs for Prophecy Watchers Homeward Bound Conference. Honored to be a part of this because the group of speakers there, L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Billy Crone, Ken Johnson, Ryan Pitterson, Terry James, Brandon Holthouse, Doug Woodward, of course, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, and many others. You can sign up for either the in-person conference, and now the sign-up is open for the live streaming as well. This will be at the Colorado Springs Marriott. If you're in the area, please join us. If not, check out the streaming video option. That is at prophecywatchers.com. Prophecywatchers.com. July will be in the Dayton area, Brookville, Ohio, the Harvest Revival Center for the Go Therefore Conference. Sharon and I, along with a lot of our friends, Pastor Mike Spaulding, Pastor Carl Gallups, Pastor Casper McLeod, Dr. Michael Lake, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, Kenny C., and Tom Dunn, Neil Peterson as well. Don't miss that one. July 29th through 31st at the Harvest Revival Center in Brookville, Ohio. Registration is now open at gothereforeconference.com, gothereforeconference.com. And very quickly, our tours of Turkey and Israel will be in Turkey from October 18th through November 3rd, visiting the cities of Revelation, Çatalhöyük, an ancient Neolithic city more than 9,000 years old, and then even older than that, Göbekli Tepe, mysterious site that archaeologists call the world's oldest temple. And we've been talking to our friends Judd Burton and Aaron Judkins about the influence of the Watchers on the pre-flood world and how that is reflected at Göbekli Tepe. Much more. Abraham's hometown, the underground city of Derinkuyu, Pamukkale, is one of the other cities that's near ancient Pergamum, and also near Pergamum is the Plutonion, which, since dedicated to the ancient god Pluto, is essentially the gates of hell, at least in the minds of the ancients. More information online at skywatchinturkey.com, and the next spring will be in Israel, and trust me, this is a unique kind of tour. We go places other tours just do not. Gilgal Rephaim on the Golan Heights, the Serpent Mound of Bashan. We're also going to a place called Bet Yerah, which is at the southwest corner of the Sea of Galilee, very close to Yardenit, where we'll go into the Jordan River and baptize those who have not been baptized. Worship in the Jordan River for sure, but this site called Bet Yerah, which means Temple of the Moon God, is, underneath the water of the Sea of Galilee, just off the shore there, is a massive megalithic monument that was only discovered 10 years ago. They say it's got half again as much stone as in Gilgal Rephaim, and nobody knows why it's there. So we're going to go there and at least talk about that. But, of course, we'll see all the places you want to see in Israel as well. Nazareth, the Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Jerusalem. We will go to the Temple Mount. And you can sign up at skywatchinisrael.com. Thank you for taking time to listen or watch wherever you are doing so, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, or wherever else fine podcasts are sold. Our announcer is DC Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.